Digital ad campaigns fail all the time. And sometimes that's to do with creative, sometimes it's to do with campaign structure. It's usually not to do with audience anymore because if you're using the algorithms and the machine learning properly, that gets taken care of with your creative. But the biggest way to burn a whole bunch of money on your ad account is simply not having your tracking set up properly, not having detailed, reliable tracking. And it's really like you're putting a blindfold on the machine learning so it can't figure out what you're trying to accomplish and it can't set up the campaign to get you what you need. When your ad campaigns are blind, they can't tell the difference between qualified traffic that's early in the customer journey, and traffic that's just about to turn into a purchaser or a repeat buyer. And this is especially prevalent with B2B sales companies that aren't on an e-commerce platform. E-commerce is a lot more robustly set up in terms of your software options. Platforms like Shopify, WooCommerce, BigCommerce have all these integrations built in. So they're sending all the data points back to Meta and Google automatically without you having to do too much. You basically click a few buttons, connect it up to your account, and you're off to the races. But I've seen some e-commerce companies not set that up. And that means they don't know when a potential customer has just viewed your homepage versus have looked at a specific product and then moved on to adding to cart, added a payment option in, and then purchased. That whole journey, there's lots of little signals, little micro signals that are happening all the way through that customer's interaction with all of your assets, especially your website. So when it doesn't have that information, it doesn't know which of your content to show to a specific person when they're scrolling through their Facebook feed or they're watching YouTube. So that's why I say the machine is blind if you don't have good tracking. The old school way of setting this stuff up prior to Apple's privacy updates, and everybody's followed suit since then, was to have your Google Pixel or your Meta Pixel on your website and then just give it a custom conversion and say, if someone hits this page, this means that they have made a purchase. And you can still do that. If you have very basic technological abilities, then you can set it up that way. It's pretty easy. And you'll be able to tell the machine learning that a conversion has happened because someone hit a thank you page after they made a purchase. But you're only telling a small amount of the story because you're not passing through any detail about that customer, even as basic as how much they spent in that one transaction. So you no longer have a value chain that tells the machine how valuable that customer is. Did they buy $500 worth of gear? Did they buy $20? Or did they just sign up for the email list? All of these things are conversions in their own right, but they all have a different value. And every time we add data to the machine learning with this value data baked in, then it can figure out who the next person that's going to purchase the large value item is going to be, what interactions they had before they made that decision, and what creative they interacted with to get them to that spot in the journey. Your business is quite often just when you ask them, what's a conversion for you? They just said, it's a sale. Get me a sale. I want a sale. And of course, that's the bottom line. Like, sales are what pay the bills. But how did the customer get to the point of being a customer? What are all the signals that they sent to you along the way that allow you to analyze what it takes for somebody to go from being a prospect to being a loyal customer? These are the signals that if you don't send them, the machine learning has nothing to go on to find you more of those customers and figure out what they need to see at what time in their journey. And like I mentioned in a previous video, it's like a super smart, but super hyper literal intern. It's going to work really hard to get you what you tell it you want, and it's going to do that based on the information you send to it. So if you send it more detailed, reliable information, it can paint a better picture in its databases of what your customer looks like. And every time it sees a new person interacting with your content, it can place them in that journey, figure out what they need to see next to move them down that customer journey towards being your customer. And that's what machine learning is all about. And this is the reason why I say machine learning more than I say AI. AI, artificial intelligence, is actually conflated with machine learning. What we think of as AI now is a machine learning. Every time you give it inputs, its job is to get a better, higher probability of giving you the correct output on the other side. And the more data it has and the more iterations and reps it has, the better job it can do of figuring that piece out and having a higher probability of getting what you want out the other end. But you've got to do that work to send it the information it needs to be able to figure this stuff out for you. But to go back to the analogy of the machine being an intern, The more information you give the intern, the better a job that intern will do. It's the same thing with the machine, but also the better feedback it can give you to give it even better data and more information and more tools to do the job better. Think about it as a weekly review meeting. If you're sending these signals appropriately, your creative is going to start lining up with the outcomes of those signals. So if you have a piece of content that's meant to stop the scroll on social and have your ideal customer halt and look at what you're talking about, watch a video, they may not even click, but you may be able to reach people for a lot less because more people are going to engage with that content. If you're also sending website data back on which pages that person then visits, the machine can figure out who that person is, why they stopped and watched that video, and what they're going to do next in all likelihood, what the probability of them moving down the customer journey is, or whether they even should still be in your customer journey. If they have very similar traits to other people who dropped out of the customer journey and never purchased, it's better for the machine to know that. And it means that you can start analyzing every piece of creative and all the data that the machine is giving back to you from the platform to say, this is how people interact with this piece of content, and this is what they do after they interact with it. Maybe that's the one that makes them add to cart. Maybe this is the one that gets the really high click-through rate onto your website and onto the add to cart page because now they've had some extra questions answered, or maybe they've seen a client testimonial that makes them feel more confident about clicking that purchase button. So now you have a lens on every piece of creative that's in your customer journey ad set. And you can start to make decisions on which pieces are weak and which pieces are strong. Where do you need to put new creative into play to beat creative that's underperforming at that specific point? Is it not getting enough people at a cheap enough cost to view the first video and make their first introduction to your brand? Okay, now you need to find a piece of creative to challenge it. Are they not clicking through to the website? What's the piece of creative that convinces them that the next step they should take is to click to the website, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The more you do this, the more predictability the machine is going to have to get the right outcome for you. And the easier it is for you to come up with new creative experiments that solve a very specific part of the customer journey rather than trying to be all things to all people. I'll do another video that shows you how to set this all up. It can be complicated depending on what your tech stack is, but it's always possible. Sometimes it just takes longer than other times. But if you've got any questions about the concepts behind making sure you've got all this data, please hit me up in the comments, send me a DM, and I'll see you next time.